Another day has come to an end. I've been doing these in the evenings. Now, funny. We're gonna start this off with a bit of funny. Hopefully, some people will get our sense of humor. And we definitely goof around a lot more than we don't. Anyways, we're walking along the sidewalk today, people watching and stuff, and coming back after eating some food, and we saw some guy go by with a full-on 70s cheesy mustache. And then we were joking about how the 70s stashes are coming back. And then I said, yeah, it's kind of funny, eh? Like Adolf Hitler, he kind of ruined the Hitler mustache for anybody in the world. Nobody would ever make a mustache like that ever again, guaranteed, right? Grow a mustache like that, and we're laughing. And then I started thinking about it, I'm like, he actually ruined that name for anybody in the world too, right? I mean, who in their right mind would name their child Adolf? Right? It's not going to happen. Nobody is going to name their child Adolf because of Hitler ever again. And then we started joking, and I started thinking, who else? What other names have been ruined? Sarah's right here, by the way. What other names were there? So there's Adolf, got ruined, right?
Oprah.
Come on, who's going to name their kid Oprah? Nobody. Nobody I know. Nobody's going to name their kid Oprah. It ain't going to happen. Who else? There was a good one. So Adolf. Nobody's going to name their kid Adolf. Nobody's going to name their kid Oprah. Definitely nobody's going to name their kid Spock. Right? Spock on Star Trek. He ruined it. Nobody's going to name their kid Spock ever. Who else? Who else will you never come across again named a certain name? How about, Obama. Nobody's going to name the kid Obama. It's not going to happen, right? Two of the most evil beings that ever walked the face of the planet. The dude that allegedly did 9/11. And one of the possibly the most evil presidents that ever walked the earth, Obama, right? You're not going to name your kid Obama. Who else? I think we had some other ones. But anyway, there you go. There was our 6 cents of humor this evening. Thought I'd share that one. And if anybody can add to it, do it in the comment section below, because it made a bunch of laughs for us. Right? Think about some kind of celebrity, good or bad. Think of the name, and the name that absolute nobody will ever use that name ever again. All right, moving along. Back to the task at hand. Not a task, but the goal, which is to share as many names as possible. To share as many emails and voices as possible. All right, here we go. Listen to this, you guys. This one's titled Forest People, Hendricks Lake, BC. Inability to share encounters. Steve, I watched your channel for a number of years and loved your hunt stories. I'd often wondered if you ever had an encounter since you spend so much time in the bush. Then you told the viewers about your experience. My encounters spanned from 1972 present. I had moved from rural Manitoba to an isolated mining town in the Caribou Mountains at age of 12. Isolated mining town. I'll bet you that was Goldbridge. I spent every waking moment exploring, fishing, mountain climbing, etc. The first encounter was in 1971. I was across the lake from the town site cutting down trees with a hatchet to construct a raft. My friend and I took turns using the hatchet. The sun went down and it turned dark, but we continued chopping. Both of us smelt the incredibly strong stench at the same time, a mixture of skunk, wet dog, and perspiration. Our initial thought was that it was a bear. Maybe it was, but I'd never known a bear to smell so foul or to be attracted to the chopping down of trees. We escaped by jumping into a rubber dinghy we had tied up on shore and headed home. Until lately, I'd always assumed it was a bear, but after giving it some thought, it's unlikely. The next encounter happened in the early spring of 72. There was a power line that ran from the town site to the mine, which was 10 kilometers west of the town, close to the top of a mountain. Before school, I would get a ride up to the mine with my dad and ski down the power line. I would ski directly to school, and after school, I would walk back up the road and hitchhike back up the mine to ski the power line again. This is my daily routine, and Only temperatures below -40 would deter me. One afternoon while skiing, still 2 kilometers from the town site, I came across tracks in the snow. Someone had walked down an old road, probably used to log off the area where the power line had been constructed, and crossed over the trail I had used countless times skiing. The tracks were sunk in the snow a meter or more, except where this creature stepped onto my tracks. There, the prints only sunk in a foot. I could clearly make out the toes on the massive 16 to 18-inch print. Beside my ski trail was a gully over 2 meters deep and 3 meters across. I would always be careful not to ski too close for fear of falling into it. Still curious, I thought, how could this creature get across the gully? I moved my gaze to the gully and saw the tracks cross it in one large step or jump. I followed the tracks with my eyes, and they went across the power line diagonally, moving uphill and into the thick forest 50 meters away. Normally, when I would come across something strange, I would tell my siblings, parents, friends, so we'd go explore. If I found a huge grizzly track or tracks from a wolf pack, or if I ran into a herd of caribou, I would tell people. Then my gaze reached the tree line. I was hit with a fear that was foreign to me. I'm certain this creature was hiding in the tree line. I've been charged by a grizzly prior to this incident and 3 times after, and never had I encountered a fear that paralyzed me. This fear was not part of me. I wasn't wearing gloves as it was warm out, and I tried to move my fingers. It was impossible. Nothing would move. The feeling I had was so foreign, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I thought that if I could make the tracks into a bear or a moose, I would be free from the grip of whatever it was holding me. But the tracks were too obvious of what they were. It was like this fear was being projected onto me. After several moments of being frozen in place, I was able to slowly move my legs, so I pointed my skis in a downhill direction and started moving. My upper body was still paralyzed. After about a kilometer, I was relieved to discover my arms were becoming free from the paralysis. I made it back to the town site by my home. I never told anyone about this experience for 2 decades. Holy shit. I never skied again that year. I had recurring nightmares for many years, with large bipedal creatures blocking me from skiing home. Back in the early 70s, I was very unaware of anything such as forest people. I never watched TV and was oblivious of anything other than my outdoor life in a remote mining town. Yet in my dreams, I would see Sasquatch. Is it not possible that the fear that can be projected by these creatures also contains subliminal instructions of not to communicate the encounter? I've also wondered if that is how these creatures hunt, by paralyzing their prey with fear would be an easy meal. I built a cabin on a lake 10 kilometers from Hendricks Lake in 1983, as I now lived in Quesnel and wanted a place near to where I grew up. Since many winters the road was never plowed, I was unable to reach the cabin in the winter. My winters would be spent in fear of having to go to the cabin in the summer and encountering one of the creatures from my dreams. These fears would disappear once I could make it back out there. One trip out to the cabin, I found 7 trees laying on the cabin roof from 3 different directions. An 8th tree went through the outhouse from the 4th direction. There were no downed trees laying on the ground, only on structures. All the trees were green and 12 to 16 inches in diameter. It must have been a very odd windstorm. Twice I've gone down the 110-meter long trail to the cabin and found 5 downed trees, one on top of the other blocking the trail. The pile of trees were 2 meters tall and quite an obstacle. Both times, all trees were green, spruce, and pine. Last early summer, I jumped in my quad and rode from the cabin to a little lake 3 or 4 kilometers from the cabin to try my luck at fishing. When I arrived at the trail to the little lake, I got off the quad to gather my fishing gear. The first thing I noticed was the dead quietness. No birds, no wind, or even bugs, since the snow had just melted. It was eerie silent. Off in the bush, I heard 3 loud cracks of wood breaking, and then the crash of a huge tree hitting the ground. I listened for the sound of a bear or a moose running from the spot, thinking they were using the tree as a scratching post, but only silence. I was wondering why the tree never fell in the windstorm the night before. Must be the same phenomenon that breaks 15-year-old trees off about 8 to 10 feet up, or pulls tree out of the ground and shoves them back into the ground upside down, which I have come across many times. That causes the tree to fall over. The times that I have made it out to the cabin in the winter, and I have walked on the frozen lake, I have had a creature paralleling me in the forest. When I stopped, the creature would stop. When I walked, I could hear branches breaking. It could very well be a cougar or a wolf, but very odd to have branches breaking with 2 meters of snow covering the forest floor. The inability to communicate with others about my experience of being paralyzed by one of these creatures was not a conscious decision. All I can say is whatever power this creature had to paralyze me with an insane feeling of fear and cause me to have reoccurring nightmares for decades might also be able to silence people that have had an experience by deliberate or unintentional rewriting of neurons in the brain. Food for thought. Mark. And there you go. Mark, appreciate that, man. You've been here for a while now. You know. You know the patterns that everybody's writing in honestly about, right? And of course, I'm going to say, well, obviously, I've had piles of people from Quesnel area write in. Piles of people have wrote in from all over BC, one end to the other, side to side. These people, these bush people, these forest people are being seen. Always have been, probably always will be, right? Some interesting theories there. Somebody's going to chime in on this, on what you shared, for sure. For sure. Now, we've got another one from a familiar name here. I don't know if I read this one or not. I don't think so. This came in January of 2021. This is titled My Latest Encounter Just Last Fall. The day was Thursday, October 29th, 2020. With about an hour and a half of daylight left, I drove up to Hospice Hill, a spot I found in 2013 where the old, mature blacktail buck seemed to go. I'd already filled my deer tag the Sunday before, but I'd come back up Wednesday to scout for a couple of days to see what I missed out on. Yeah, I do that all the time too. After I tag out, I parked my truck and walked 600 yards through the heavily vegetated cut to the gate leading into a brand new cut area. I was just past the gate where a creek runs through and crosses the road just before the gate. The wind was blowing, quartering towards me, back down towards the creek on my right. And all of a sudden, something very heavy crashed out of the creek bottom. I thought maybe a bear, an elk, or a cow, which we occasionally have in the area, so I didn't think much of it. A few steps later, I heard a loud knock from where the crash noise was, like someone took a wooden baseball bat and whacked it against a solid tree. I wheeled around and stared in that direction. About 5 seconds later, there were 2 wood knocks on up the hill to my left in the timber, maybe 200 yards away. It sounded again like someone took a baseball bat and hit a tree. The double knock was so quick, though, that they wouldn't have had time to wind up. It would have been swinging and hitting, and then immediately swinging the other way and hitting. I wasn't afraid since I was in the wide open and in the new cut with the closest trees/brush some 40 yards away. Plus, I was packing heat. I finished my loop and arrived back in my truck just after dark with no further incidents. I drove back to camp, which is 2.7 miles as the crow flies from where I was. At 19:10, I stepped out of my trailer to take a leak, and I could hear either a strange-sounding wolf — we don't have wolves in the area — or a possible Sasquatch from camp. It was a howl/yell/roar like I had never heard before. And I've been an outdoorsman for 40 plus years. It sounded approximately 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile away towards where I heard the wood knocks. It had to be extremely loud where it was coming from, but I couldn't pick the roars up on my phone when I tried recording them. It roared 7 to 8 times before I went back in to finish my dinner. I went back outside around 20 minutes later, but heard nothing out of the ordinary. My dad and I had an actual sighting in early October of 2012, and I've had several other possible encounters in the area. Southern Washington Cascades since the early 90s. That was sent by Tom Fish. Tom, appreciate you, man. Another knower, another fellow hunter, fellow knower. And Tom actually takes care of the Facebook blacktail deer hunting page I started a handful of years ago. I think there's like 30 or 40,000 people there. As a side note, appreciate you send that in, man. Keep your head on a swivel when you're running around there, but you know what's going on. You've seen them. Who's next? I just thought up another name that nobody will ever use again for a baby. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Elvis.
You think?
Yeah, who's gonna name the baby Elvis?
Well,
Don't you think?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Add it to the list. All right, here we go. Another voice to be heard. Hi, Steve. First of all, thank you for this platform to tell our stories and not be ridiculed. Feel free to share this if you want. I emailed you a little while back about an experience I had of seeing a Sasquatch walking through my backyard. But this story is one I have permission to tell you from a good friend of mine. She asked not to use her name or exact location, as people who know her also know where she camped, and she doesn't want to have that place overrun with curiosity seekers or thrill seekers. She is just one of a handful of people that I ever told my own story to, and she had said the words we all hate. What? Excuse me. One more time. She is just one of a handful of people that I've ever told my own story to, and she had said the words we all hate and want to punch them when they say them. And those words are, I believe that you believe what you saw. Yeah. Fast forward to her experience. She and her boyfriend enjoyed camping almost every weekend in East Tennessee. Always at the same place because it's private, would know their campers around. On the last trip they got into a big, stupid argument and she walked away up a trail to just think and get her frustration out. She estimated that she had walked close to a mile, got tired and went a little off trail to sit on a fallen log. She sat there, put her head down and just cried. And several minutes later, she heard footsteps and thought it was her boyfriend, maybe, coming, but realized the sounds of footfalls were coming from the woods behind her and were coming closer. She froze, suddenly afraid. Then she just whipped her head around, and a massive Sasquatch was standing there not more than 20 feet away. She said he was at least 8 to 9 feet tall and muscular, black fur, black face with almost human features. He ducked behind a tree, but kept peeking around at her. She said her fear just suddenly vanished, and a calm came over her. She couldn't figure that out, why she felt so calm. She even said hi to him. Knowing her, this is completely out of character. I've seen her completely freak out over a bee buzzing around her. I told her this too. She maintains that it wasn't a natural calm. It felt more like she'd been tranquilized. She didn't even remember how long this went on, but she quite suddenly got her senses back, as she put it, and got up and started back to her campsite, never looking back. She didn't tell her boyfriend. She called me instead the next day, all apologetic as she recounted this story to me, and I said to her, I believe that you believe what you saw, LOL. Touché. 2 weeks later, they went back to the campsite for the weekend. She again walked up the trail to where the incident happened. Said not too many people ever, right? She just seemed to need to. Maybe just so she could actually believe what had happened. When she got to the log, there lay a bouquet of dried up wildflowers right where she had previously sat. They were all from the flowers growing wild in the area, bunched together at the bottom stems like a hand held them and laid them there. I feel that she is one lucky human being that this encounter didn't turn ugly, that the big guy used that mind control thing or whatever it is to calm her down, that the flowers were a gift for her. She's a believer now, but not an obsessed one. She doesn't go camp there anymore and never camps where there aren't more campers around. She has a healthy respect and now a healthy fear of what's in the woods. I'm still the only person she's told. She gets it now. Non-believers will never believe until they have an experience. Sincerely and thankfully, Sherilyn Sapp. Sherilyn, I hope you said it's okay to use your name, because it's out now. There you go. More patterns, right? It's funny, the paralyzing thing, the paralyzing fear, can't move, words in your head. How come all those previous big names and the so-called big names in the Bigfoot Sasquatch community, how come they never ever spoke about that publicly? Right? The amount of shit those pricks kept hidden from general public is off the chart. Right? And how do you prove that? Well, it's easy. Look at how many people we hear from now. We have heard from thousands and thousands of eyewitnesses saying the same things across the board. It frustrates me because it just solidifies that we've been lied to. People have helped us be lied to and misled, and those are people who claim to be supportive when it comes to this topic. And meanwhile, they're just a bunch of fraud sons of bitches, right? The amount of details that have been kept from us, ignored, hidden, swept under the carpet, it's stupid. Anyway, thanks for sending that in. Appreciate it. Make sure you send this video to your friend so she can hear it and understand that there's a lot of people in the same boat. All right, here we go. Who do we got? 2017 encounter. Hey, I've watched your content out on the interweb since 2006 when you were posting videos on blacktail hunting in the bush. That being said, I've been seeing your videos on Sasquatch and reading tellings of the truth. There are tall, hairy beings in the forest that we, the general public, do not entirely understand. Anyways, I've had strange encounters throughout Oregon with something that pertains to the stories I've heard regarding Sasquatch. In 2011 and 2012, I heard a large guttural scream/howl and encountered a being messing with some fence wire near where we were camping. Middle of the night, while my buddy was drunkenly screaming there was no Sasquatch. These were the first small encounters, yet in 2017 I began experiencing some new weird stuff in the woods. It was September 2017 when my buddy and I backpacked 1.5 miles into the forest to archery elk hunt in the Heppner unit. I've been in the woods since I was 4, hunting with my dad, and I've never heard a tree fall in the forest. I heard 4 trees fall over the course of one weekend in Heppner, and one of these trees falling within 80 yards of my buddy and I. I think we just read this. Yeah, we did. This is recent. Okay, sorry. Red. I don't know how that got on there twice, but oh well, it happens sometimes, right? All right, how about this one? This came in on January of 2021. By far the scariest experience I've had in my life is a tireless email. Hi Steve, thanks for all the work you've done in getting this topic out to the masses. Keep up the great work. I sent you this encounter in 2019, but I haven't heard it mentioned. Thought I'd hit you up again, as I haven't heard of many encounters in central/northern Indiana. Feel free to share my name. Thanks, Al. This sounds familiar too. I guess we'll see. Hey Steve, I've been watching your channel for the past 6+ months, and although my experience with hunting is nil, I continue to learn and appreciate nature more and more from viewing and listening to yours and others' experiences. I'm the son of a career law enforcement officer. I grew up in a very structured and honest living environment. My father was a tell-like-it-is kind of guy and saw a lot of the good and bad in people. He was very analytical in his thinking, and I believe that's one of the traits that we inherited and learned growing up. Fast forward to the summer of '85. My parents, sister, and wife spent time vacationing in Florida on the Gulf Coast in late August. As my wife and I had driven down to meet the rest of the family, we went on to visit my in-laws with my older sister who didn't want to fly back home to Chicago. We're driving back home north of Indianapolis. My sister was asleep in the passenger seat and my wife was asleep in the back. I was driving in the right lane of the divided 4-lane interstate I-65 north of Indianapolis. As it was about 3 a.m.,
and there was very little traffic on the road, mostly just tractor-trailer rigs once in a while. A big rig passed me in the left lane doing 85 plus miles per hour. I could feel the air push my car to the right as it went by. Now, I was going 70 plus at the time, but not a lead foot by any means. I watched the truck pass over a slope in the roadway ahead, and the rear taillights disappeared. When I got to the top of the slope, I could see the truck off in the distance, but pulling away. Then I noticed its brake lights go on for a few seconds, then off, then on again for a longer period of time, like it was slowing down or something. About 15 seconds later, the brake lights were off and the truck continued on. As I was coming down the other side of the slope where the truck had put on its brake lights, I could see something on the right side shoulder. I thought it might be an abandoned car that had broken down. The night was calm, and even though there were no lights on the interstate, the moon kept things from being total darkness. As I was getting closer, I started to realize that this shadow that I thought might be a small car was anything of the sort. I put my foot on the brake, disengaging the cruise control, and started to slow down. I put on the high beams. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. At this point, I reached across and smacked my sister to wake up as I was yelling profanities, "What the F is that?" My sister gained her composure and looked at my pointing and immediately was struck with fear. As we approached on the shoulder of the road was a big buck that was facing away from us, but I couldn't see its rack on the right side of some big dark object. Between us and the buck was a big thing, dark in color but huge. I was probably down to 30 miles per hour now and slowing as my foot was still on the brake. I yelled back to my wife to wake up and see this thing, but she never did. My sister was becoming frantic with the "let's get out of here," and was grasping towards the console in the middle of the car. I was probably 30 to 40 yards from this thing, and now I could make out the large torso, a V shape like a bodybuilder with a small waist but huge shoulders. It was facing away from us and was covered in dark, almost black fur. It reminded me of an ape in the zoo, but the hair was more shiny, maybe due to the high beams. I didn't see its face, as its back was to me, and it looked like it was squatting down. It had arms, as it was busy on the underside of the deer. It looked like it was busy eating. As we got right upon it, I started to change lanes and move to the left, not only due to my sister's yelling, but also the fear that was welling up in me. As we slowly started to pass this thing, it turned to the left. Not the whole body, just the head. It didn't have a neck that I remember, but it had a face that looked wet. It wasn't a gorilla that was staring right at us. It wasn't a man. I don't know what it was, but I know from the look that it wasn't amused we were there. My sister screamed at me again, and I floored the car. I was busy looking back out the right side passenger window and almost lost control of the car and put it into the ditch/grassy area between the northbound and southbound lanes. As I got back on the roadway, I looked in the mirror, and I swear this thing was watching us. My wife never did wake up during this incident. We stopped for gas once in northern Indiana, and we told my wife, who had finally woken up, but she didn't believe us. I did try to catch up to that trucker as there were no other vehicles heading north at that time, but even driving 95 plus for 20 minutes, we never did see the vehicle. I was so roused by the incident that I got a speeding ticket in Chicago that morning for going 30 over the limit on the Dan Ryan Expressway just trying to get home. When we met at my parents' house later that night, my dad didn't believe us either. Asked if we had been drinking and admonished me for the speeding ticket. To this day, my sister and I don't talk about this to anyone outside of the immediate family. If I bring it up in conversation, it puts the hairs up on our arms. I don't know what we saw that night, but it was not a bear, wasn't a wolf or anything I've ever seen before and hopefully never will again. It has convinced me that there are some things out in nature that we have no clue about. And just to let you know, I don't camp, hike, or love the outdoors as I did in my younger days. Now that I'm turning 60, I really don't care what people think. I know what we saw, and no one can ever take that away from us. Al Lang. You got that right, Al. You got that right. Once you see, you know. Nobody can change what you saw. Although they want to. They want to so bad, though, at times, right? They just want to so bad at times. Appreciate you sending that in, man. Make sure your sister hears this email too, or email this video too, if you can, all right? Just send it to her, just so she knows. Just so she knows there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the world that are seeing the same shit. Next. Hello, Steve. My name is Michael. I've been an outdoorsman all my life, and I haven't seen Bigfoot myself, but I heard knocks in the woods many times. I'm writing to you about some stories I have told over the years by my dad and coworkers, and here's my dad's stories. Number one, when my dad was a teenager, him and his buddies were coon hunting in the White's Ferry area. He said the dog started chasing something. An hour later, the dogs cornered the thing at a stone fence, so they went to see what the dogs had cornered. He said it was 8 feet tall and 600 pounds and had a head of a wolf. After seeing this thing, they dropped their lights and guns and ran, being passed by the dogs. He said he saw the thing again a couple days later walking across a graveyard in early morning hours. What the hell? What's up with the graveyard thing and being scary shit? Isn't that weird? Number two, in 1940, he was driving east on Old Leesburg Road, coming up to the old steel bridge, and he saw what he was thinking was a man walking on the bridge in a fur coat. When he got closer, it jumped up on the side of the bridge and tried to grab the car. Number three, he then told me he saw it again in the summer of '59 on the family farm near Chantilly, Chantilly. He saw it walking across the back cornfield. He said it was stepping over the corn that was 4 feet tall at the time. That's all the stories he told us kids growing up. Co-workers, we all work for a big farming company that did cattle, grains, and sod. My job there was cowboy and fencing. Number one, Timmy told me one day I needed to go repair a new fence I just finished the week before. I asked him if a tree had fallen on it. He told me no, that he was hunting near it. He shot a deer, and as he's going down the ladder from his stand, he heard a growl and went back up, thinking it was a bear. Then he told me he watched this thing walk up to the deer, grab it, and walk off on 2 legs. Walked over the fence, stepped on the top wire, and pushed all the wires down, popping all the staples out of 2 posts. This fence is 10 strands of high tensile wire with 3-inch barbed staples. A 2,000-pound animal can run into it and be knocked back 3 foot. And that's the end of the email. I don't know if there's any more, man, but if there is, get them to me. That's something else, hearing about the fence stomped down. And more people enter the club of no return without applying or asking to be accepted, right? You're just automatically in and there's no way out. No way out. Thanks for sending that in. Keep them coming. All right, here comes another one. When did this come in? I haven't a clue. Hi, Steve. I'll try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. I have one odd experience and a story from a local Indian. I live in Port Angeles, Washington. In 2013, a buddy and I were riding some local DNR, Department of Natural Resources, dirt bike trails / old logging roads about 4 miles from any hard roads. We rode up to an area probably 3,000 foot in elevation. As it began to get foggy, because we were basically in the clouds, me ripping along about 20 meters behind my buddy, I got this incredible feeling like a deer or a bear was around. Something made my hair stand up. I thought, man, if I was a predator, this is perfect hunting weather. It wouldn't be odd to have an animal burst across the logging road when we were riding. Happens all the time, but I've never had this weird feeling before. It's impossible to describe. I had no way of communicating this to my buddy, so I just continued on following. Before that thought had even had a chance to leave my mind, I saw a huge rock about the size of a large softball come flying from where I would say like 15 to 20 feet high at about 9 o'clock position. It just missed my buddy's head and hit him in the shoulder hard enough to spin his upper body sideways and almost crash. He looked back at me and I just shrugged my shoulders and we kept riding. All that happened in about 10 to 15 seconds and at about 30 miles per hour. A few minutes later, we stopped on the trail at a viewpoint to take a break, and my buddy said, "Did you throw that rock at me just a minute ago?" I said, "No, but I seen that rock come flying at you from high and to the left." That area is flat on both sides of the trail for almost 60 yards. Then on the right side drops down to a draw, and the left, the side the rock came from, begins to climb up the side of the hill that's pretty steep but full of timber. I think we both knew what it was, but we just stopped talking about it and never really rode there again, till about 2 years ago. I went to the same spot and didn't get any weird vibes, other than my mind being blown away and creeped out about the whole thing. This next one happened probably a year or so before my first story. My wife and I always have believed in the beings. Long story short, my buddy knew this and always poked fun at us. One day he introduced me to this Indian girl. He said her dad was a chief and they knew a bunch about Sasquatch. I was very intrigued, so I asked the girl. She was very reluctant to tell my wife and I anything. We told her we don't want to ridicule her. We truly believe they exist. After much convincing, she kicked my buddy out and invited us to her land. We gratefully accepted. On the way there, she began to open up a little. I think she was seeing what our reaction would be. She began to tell us they are real, and they protect certain tribes and are worshipped. Our minds were blowing. She said her father is a chief and her grandfather an elder. For hundreds of years, the local natives have been feeding them with salmon and animal carcasses by hanging them high in a tree. They receive protection, even in afterlife, from the beings. When we got to her land, we went into her house, and on every wall was drawings, masks, all types of Sasquatch tribal things. We didn't ever get to talk to her dad or grandfather, but after hearing her story and seeing her home, no one will ever convince my wife and I that they don't exist. I love what you do, Steve. Started watching you years ago. Great storyteller. Keep up the good fight, brother. P.S. If you're ever in Port Angeles, give me a shout. I know lots of great fishing and hunting spots. Man, I'd love to do that. I was so curious of Port Angeles and those mountains across the water from my bedroom window all my life. I never ran around there once. I almost made it across. I used to look across my binoculars at the closest point of land and you see how much wild zone you guys got over there. It is a lot. And there's a lot of people that have emailed in experiences from there too, right? A lot. Anyway, appreciate you sending that in and the invite, big time. What's this? I'm going to read one more. Hi, Steve. We live on the island near Little Qualicum Falls Park, not far from me, and where there is a shit pile of sightings. Our road turns into logging roads, which in turn go up top to Lockwood Mountain. On the morning of January 15th, 2020, I walked to the bottom of our 2 acres with my dogs to check my trail camera. As I took the film out of the camera, I heard this very loud chirping. It sounded like a groundhog with a megahorn, but there was a kind of a deep bark with it. It's the only way I can describe it. I looked around in the salal, and it chirped/barked again. I looked in the trees in the shalal again, and it chirped again and again and again. And I kept looking, but I couldn't see anything that would be within 10 feet of me that I could justify the loudness of the sound. We have crown land behind us that was logged 12 or so years ago and replanted, so there is no canopy. Just young trees and heavy brush, deep, uneven ground with upended roots due to root rot in this area. It's very difficult to walk through, and as looked out through the growth, I saw what appeared to be a big brown head. It was the size of those small gray dishes people put on the side of their house for the internet. It was a darkish brown hairy head. I remember thinking, what the hell is that? So I'm kind of looking up and down between the other scrubs closest to me to see if I can get a better look at it, or see more of what was attached to this head. Because it was far enough away, I have no detail as to a face looking human or smell or anything, just big, brown, and hairy. I walked down my fence a little bit, staring at the area, trying to see if I could see more of what was attached to this head, but I couldn't. So I walked back to where my camera was, to where I first seen this thing, and it was gone. The next day, my husband struggled to walk out to see if he could find the same spot, which he did, and he put his hand in the air, and he is 6 feet tall, and with his hand up, it was not high enough. So he put a stick up, and I said, that's it. Then the height of where this head was sitting. Steve, that was 10 to 11 feet in the air. No stumps, no trees to stand on, nothing. There was a large area tramped down in 2 tracks through the growth. One coming, one going, or one going and one coming. There was something large had gone through. And there was a really good veil, or a blind, I guess you could say, for this thing to stand behind, and all it had to do was duck down, and I would never seen it. A little to one side, there was a large flattened area on the ground in the ferns and salal weeds. I believe this Alma just wanted to have a look at me. Not for me to see it, but it kept chirping while I was searching for the source of the noise, till I saw the head. Then it did not make another sound. So that's my story. I'm kind of gobsmacked and terrified to have something that close like that to our property, especially since my little dogs like to run down there and bark at the smells of the game trail. We have elk, bear, cougar, wolf, and deer, and various small dogs, cats and coons, and such using this trail past our 6-foot fence. Be safe always. Best regards, Lee Beck. P.S. It would be cool if you stopped in when you go to port fishing and sign your book for me. Yeah, I think I've read this before. I think I've heard from you guys before, haven't I? Well, you know by now for sure. You know what goes on around there, around your community, around the Horn Lakes Caves, Cameron Lake, the hilltops on both sides, Mount Arrowsmith, and then go along the Beaufort Mountains heading west, northwest, and of course my hood, right? Everywhere around there. So many people have seen these things around you and around me. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But anyway, there you go. More voices share it, right? And they don't stop coming. Anyway, I'll bite my lip. I had a bunch I was going to say talking about the state of our country, our countries in North America. Man, oh man, I'll tell you what, after jumping out of the bubble, and you go to a country where they got their shit together, and then you realize, we're talking about it today, how this country probably has houses that are older than Canada and the US. Right? And it's amazing. It's amazing once you get out of your bubble, get away from your home country, when you realize how young, I mean, our country, Canada and the US, they're basically toddlers when it comes to other countries in the world. And then you realize just how quickly it took the people in charge to run our countries into an embarrassment, failure. It's weird. It's a weird thing to witness and see clearly from outside the bubble. Anyways, I'll bite my lip. I could go on. I'll stop. Share my story at howtohunt.com, all right? Get your experiences out, get your information out, get anything that'll help the people out. If you need voices, you need ears to hear it, this is a good place to do it, and I'll do it word for word. Share my story at howtohunt.com. I'll be back again.